person and online. Great to see everyone. So welcome. This is the 10th meeting of the Clark County Climate Change Planning Community Advisory Group, and we appreciate everyone joining us today. I'll go through some intro slides and then we'll dive in. And I'm Sylvia Chiborowski, helping to facilitate these meetings. So let's go to the next slide. This work is funded by Washington's Climate Commitment Act. Thank you. Let's keep going. All right, so, and we can just keep going to the next slide. So welcome everyone. I think we have most of our staff here, and Jenna, I was going to point to you on staff for a second. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see you all again, either in the room or online. And just wanted to mention a few other folks here with me. I've got Amy Koski here again today. Amy works in public health and is helping me with the climate project. And Jose Alvarez in the audience. Jose is the program manager for community planning, also here to listen in, but provide support if needed as well. So thank you all for joining me today.
Great, thank you, Jenna. I'm getting used to the microphones again and having to push the button every time, and it seems extra sensitive today. So online, if you're not hearing us well or something, let us know. Yes, Brent. Yeah, there is an echo. Online, just wait just a second. We're going to see if we can make the mics a little bit better. All right, we're doing another test. How does that sound? Good. All right, we're going to keep troubleshooting. Thank you for your patience. Just a moment. Okay, I'm talking more. We're trying all these settings. Is that better? A little better. Okay. We're going to try one more. Is this better? Do we want 1, 2, or 3? Yeah, no, you don't.
I get the optometrist.
Yeah, choice 1. No, I'm kidding. Does this sound okay right now? Okay, let's stick with this one. All right, thanks everyone. Great, then we're going to keep going. Let's move to the next slide. All right, so we always start our meetings with a reminder of our vision statement, is just why we're here. We haven't reviewed this in a while, so just a reminder that the purpose of this group is to implement House Bill 1181 to create a climate chapter support Clark County meeting its greenhouse gas emission reduction, vehicle mile traveled reduction, resilience, and environmental justice goals. And we have a vision that by 2045, Clark County will have good stewardship, better health equity, green jobs, transformed transportation, energy, and waste systems, and be better prepared for uncertainty. All right, let's keep moving. Next slide. I know you're multitasking over there. All right, so today we have a meeting that's going to be a lot of information for you. We haven't met since October, and since then a lot has happened on the project, and the county has met with internal partners, with external community members, well, really throughout the last year, and has also been meeting with the Environmental Justice Coalition and others. And so Jenna is going to spend a good chunk of time just recapping everything that's happened and how that has led to changes in the climate element goals and policies that you all helped shape from the start. And then they kind of went forward for other input. And now they're going to be coming back to you, as you know, that was the process that we had at the beginning. So today, you know, the goals are going to look different than they were in October due to all of that input that has been collected. So going to spend plenty of time just understanding what's happened and making sure that you all are clear on that. And you'll see some examples of how the goals and policies have been changed. And then we're also going to spend some time reviewing your process for coming to consensus. Over the next 3 meetings, really the goal of this group is to look at all the goals and policies, decide which ones you want to put forward as recommendations to the Planning Commission and to County Council, which means, what are the recommendations that you all have consensus on, that you all agree to, that you want to put forward. And then there may be some that we don't get to a consensus recommendation on. And we'll spend lots of time talking about what that means, what the process looks like. So really today is a lot of like information and talking through the process for the next few months. Next slide. And so our agenda for doing that, we'll have project updates and then spend a lot of time on that progress since the October CAG meeting. We'll have a break and then go over this group's process for reviewing the goals and policies and moving forward a recommendation. And we'll also have time for a public comment. We have a couple of members from the public here in the room and maybe some online. So we'll have 10 minutes there for public comment, about 2 minutes apiece. We'll explain that more when we get there too. Next slide. Okay, I think we all know how to join these meetings at this point. But if you're online, just a reminder to use the raise hand button to get in the queue. And if you're in the room, use your tent card to just say you want to speak by lifting it up that way. And we do have a break later today, but move around, take care of yourself as you need to. There's pizza in the back for members if you need to eat, and restrooms are down the hall there. And next slide. Okay, and our discussion guidelines, like I said, today really is a lot of information to you rather than a lot of discussion. The last few meetings have been very discussion focused, but still we encourage you to, ask respectful questions, ask questions to understand, try to learn from each other's perspectives, and listen and speak with respect, especially as staff is kind of going through an enormous amount of work that has happened over the last few months. And also if you're using the chat, please remember to chat to everyone. And I think that's it for these. Or maybe one more slide. We just want to approve CAG meeting summary number 9, which you probably got in early November and might not remember it, but we assume it's approved unless somebody had some edits that you wanted to submit online, through email. Okay. I think with that, we'll move to project updates. And I'll hand it over to Jenna.
Okay. So hi again, this is Jenna, and I'm going to go through the updates quickly. So wanted to give an update on our county council liaisons to this group. So Councilor Michelle Belcott is still the council liaison for this group for the rest of the project. The council members just reaffirmed their appointments for committees for the rest of the year. And Councilor Little is the new alternate council liaison to this group. So if Councilor Belcott can't make it, Councilor Little may attend in her place.
All right, folks online, we're going to work on the audio for a minute.
Is this any better? Okay. Okay, does it still work here? That's still okay?
It was better, but
Maybe I should just go stand. What if I'm further away? Is it better if I'm not as close to the mic? No?
Yes, it sounds better when you're not
That's
close.
weird.
Hi, Jenna. And online, it sounds better when you're further out. I don't know in person.
Yeah, Gabriella, we see that you're speaking, but we can't hear you. So give us just a minute.
She always speaks. She's really proud. Gabriella, do you want to try again?
Can you hear me now?
She needs. Yes, you're very quiet, but we can hear you.
I don't know why. My volume is all the way up. I was saying that it sounds better when you are further out from the microphone. Sorry, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hmm. Uses the speaker. Is this any better? It sounds about the same. Well, okay. Let's try one more time. Thank you all for your patience. What about now? Did it carry? Why is it?
It sounds
Maybe I'll
fine
just go
as
stand over there.
I mean, honestly, maybe.
I think, because you have so much speaking, yeah. it's just-
But then look, like, Brent, can you just unmute and let's hear how you're just going?
This is Brent. I have unmuted and I'm saying something.
What about this? Is that any better? Like if I'm just further away?
How is that?
I'll let her say it.
Okay. Okay. All right, I will try. Feel free to remind me. I do have a tendency to talk very quickly. So is that okay? I'm kind of talking like this. Still sounds, okay. Okay, how is that? That's okay? Okay, well, I'll be over here for now. We'll see if we can figure it out. Okay, so I'm going to restart the project updates. Thank you all again for your patience with our sound issues. I wanted to give a quick update because our county councilors just reconfirmed their appointments for the year and which committees they are on. So Councilor Michelle Belcott is continuing on as the council liaison to this group. I believe Councilor Belcott is online today and will join meetings as she is able. And if she is not able to join a meeting, Councilor Little is the new alternate council liaison to this group. So he will attend if Councilor Belcott cannot.
Hey, Jenna, I'm on and that is correct. We just got done with council, so I'm here.
Wonderful. Welcome, Councilor.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I wanted to just give you a preview of your meeting materials. And if we could go to the next slide. Okay, it was quite a big meeting packet, so I want to just talk through it briefly, and then we'll touch on some of these items more throughout the evening. So you had your standard materials that included, the meeting summary you just approved, comments from other CAG members that were submitted since your meeting in October. So it's been several months, so there are quite a few, as well as comments received from the public since your last meeting. And then the primary document we'll be talking about today is the big spreadsheet for those of you in the room, and online it's the document called Side-by-Side Comparison of October 2024 draft policies and January 2025 revised draft policies. So we'll be talking about that document a lot throughout today's meeting. And then we provided you with an entire library of materials as background materials in your meeting packet. These are, we'll talk about them today, but they're really intended as reference materials moving forward through the rest of the project. As you all are considering which policies you want to recommend, there's a lot of extra supporting information there that's available for you to dig into details if you would like. So we'll mention what those things are throughout today's presentation. But it includes things like a comment tracker, some equity memos we wrote for the Environmental Justice Coalition, summaries of the public engagement feedback, the policy analysis work our consultants did, as well as a glossary of terms, which I know this group requested many months ago, but we now have a working version of that as well. Okay, so again, it's a lot of materials, but it's really a resource library for moving forward. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So I want to just talk about where we are in the project schedule. So if you all recall this slide, this is the overarching decision-making process for this project. And just starting at the beginning, you all spent the last year considering various information and developing a draft list of policies for resilience and greenhouse gas reduction. And then that draft policy list went to the Environmental Justice Coalition. And we also got input from the partner agency team and looked at those policies in comparison to feedback received from the public. And it is now coming back to you all to work towards your final recommendation with all of the suggestions from those other groups for you to consider. So we're at that starred item right now, and you all will be working on that through March. And then your recommendation will be packaged to move forward to the Planning Commission and ultimately to the County Council. Let's go to the next slide. So if we just dig a little bit deeper into this timeline, just a quick reminder that you all did a lot last year. We covered a lot of ground starting about a year ago, from creating a vision statement to brainstorming and developing draft policy lists to negotiating areas where there was differences of opinion on that list, to you all weighing in on how to weight criteria to help prioritize policies. So just want to recognize that a lot of work has been done already. And then let's go to the next slide. And since you all took your break in October, a lot of work, as Sylvia said, has been happening for the last couple months, which we'll be filling you all in on today. So I won't go through that right now. And we are now in that center rectangle, phase 4, where you're working to your final policy recommendations to consider all of this additional feedback from other folks, discuss and refine the policy list, and work towards a consensus recommendation on 20-year county policies to include in the new county's climate chapter. So that's where we will be focusing our time today. And we'll talk about the rest of the process later on. Okay, next slide. All right, back to you, Sylvia.
Okay. Great. So now we're going to move into talking about what all has happened since the October CAG meeting, and Jenna's going to kind of dive into all of the details here. But just a reminder that at the beginning of this process, we laid this out as the CAG would be kind of brainstorming and coming up with the initial ideas for the goals and policies for resilience and greenhouse gas reduction. And so a lot of work has been done there. And then a lot has happened over the past couple of months with other groups to refine that list. And that's coming back to you today and for the next few months. And so I'll turn it back to Jenna to kind of go through all those pieces. And as she goes through that, she'll go through each of the different groups that have provided input on the goals and policies, and then also provide some examples of how they have changed in response to that input so that you have a sense of what's happened. And then we'll have plenty of time throughout for questions as well. We might just stop for questions after each sort of logical break point, like after she goes through explaining what the Environmental Justice Coalition has done. We can stop for questions and then go through the slides that way, because there is quite a bit of material to cover. All right, back to you.
All right. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the quick version of what has happened since your October 23rd CAG meeting is that if you all recall, at that meeting, you were providing feedback on draft policies at that time. We took the feedback from that meeting, incorporated what you all decided on there, and then used that version of the draft policies for additional review and analysis by other folks. So that's our starting point, is where you all left it in October. In terms of the public engagement that the county has been doing over the past year with the Environmental Justice Coalition's help, we wrapped up our work in December, and all of that engagement work out with the general public has been compiled into summaries. The Environmental Justice Coalition reviewed those summaries to make sure it accurately reflected what they heard through their engagement activities. And then they reviewed the draft policy list using an equity lens and provided feedback on the policies. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then they had an opportunity to check what staff did with their feedback to make sure it was accurately captured. The partner agency team, this is, other county staff and other partners, so utilities, cities, the ports, and so forth. They also had a chance to review policies and provide feedback regarding feasibility and authority. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Our technical consultant teams conducted a second level analysis on the priority policies, and that included quantifying emissions reduction impact of the priority. It has a quantified emissions reduction impact for the priority greenhouse gas reduction policies. So we'll talk more about that. And then county project staff, we did a few things, including reviewing policies for consistency and integration with other parts of the comprehensive plan. We were checking for consistency with various laws. We also were the consolidating entity, so looking at all the feedback from these other groups and figuring out what to do with that feedback. And then also looked at how we could clarify and reduce redundancy and things like that in the list. So that's who provided feedback. And in terms of how we use the feedback provided for the public engagement summaries that we created, we, as I mentioned, all the feedback that was collected was summarized in reports. We reviewed those key themes and compared it to the draft policy list to just look for any gaps or inconsistency between what members of the public were saying and what the draft list looked like. Similarly, we reviewed all the feedback the EJC provided at their November and December meetings using the equity lens, compared it to the draft list to see if there was anything we should change based on that feedback. Similarly, with the partner agency team feedback, compared it to the draft list and said any gaps, inconsistencies that we need to address. And then we reviewed again for where can we make things more clear? Can we reduce redundancy? Can we be more consistent with state law, things like that. And so this whole process, it's documented in a lot of those background materials. So if you go to use those as reference, you can look at the public engagement feedback reports and appendices for public engagement feedback. There's a document called Public Engagement Feedback Crosswalk with draft policies that shows how we assessed the key themes from public engagement. We have a comment tracker that's a really big table that captures the feedback from all these different groups since November. And then the big spreadsheet that we've printed for you all today and the side-by-side comparison document, if you're online, is the version that shows, okay, here's where the policies were in October. Here's where they are now with proposed revisions in January. And then it has a quick summary on what has changed. So that's what the big printed spreadsheet is that's in front of you today. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So just at a really high level, in terms of what has changed in the list, one of the things we did is we now have one list instead of two. So previously we had a greenhouse gas reduction policy list and we had a resilience policy list. But we were really struggling that there was quite a bit of duplication between the two lists. And so it was making more sense for us to create a single list that has all the resilience and greenhouse gas policies on it. And so we've now, for any given policy, we've noted if it's a greenhouse gas policy, a resilience policy, or both. Okay, so we're now working off of a single list. We have modified or proposed adding some new policies to help address gaps that were through all that, looking at the feedback and issues identified from these other groups. We did a lot of merging of those similar policies. So for instance, we have, tree policies related to resilience, and we had some tree policies related to greenhouse gas reduction. And so they were really similar in a lot of cases. So we've merged them to try not to repeat ourselves. And there's a couple of cases where we've recommended removing a policy, either because based on the feedback, we realized it really just wasn't clear, or it was redundant in some other way. Maybe another agency is actually really the lead for it, and it doesn't make sense as a county policy. So we have one list. We have also put every policy into a category. We have 7 categories. These categories were inspired by your vision statement, loosely. So that was the inspiration as we were looking for how to organize them. So we have a health and well-being category, a green jobs category, an ecological stewardship category, transportation and land use, buildings and energy, waste management, and county governance. And so right now the list has 33 goals, 124 policies, and this does include those policies we'd previously discussed that are going to be cross-referenced, but we did leave them on the list for now just so, again, we just sort of have everything in front of you in one place. Okay, so I'm going to dive into more detail in a moment, but maybe I should pause here before I keep going.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to pause, see if there's any questions on this overview of how things have changed at a high level. Yeah, go ahead, Anne. And just a reminder to say your name when you're speaking.
Sorry. Ann Foster, quick question. Is this and this, whoops, are these the same? Just different format?
Yeah, and for those online, Anne is holding up the side-by-side big spreadsheet, as well as a smaller document. That smaller document just has the revised policy version on it, because we do know the big spreadsheet's kind of a bit much to process. So yes, so the policies on the little sheet match the column in the big sheet that says the January version.
Okay. Second question. When you say cross-referenced, does that mean you're referencing it someplace in the comp plan update content?
When we say cross-reference, we mean that the policy may live. Well, let me backtrack. When we previously talked about cross-referencing, we had looked at some policies that already exist in another chapter in the comprehensive plan. So these are policies that already exist and live somewhere else. So by cross-referencing them in the climate chapter, we're going to need to use some words that's like see policy 1, 2, 3 in the land use chapter of the comp plan.
Yeah.
So it would still count as climate policies, but they already exist somewhere else.
Someplace else.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Anne. And Monica?
Thank you. So mine was in line with the community input part. My comment actually, as a CAG member, I'd like to recognize that Friends of Clark County represents thousands of supporters who live here in Clark County. ACE, Alliance for Community Engagement, represents even more residents, and so does the local Sierra Club, who have endorsed FOCC's comments to the CAG. I'd like to make sure the CAG fulfills our obligation to represent our community's wishes in climate planning. So I move to include discussion of FOCC and ACE's individual sets of comments into the agenda for our next meeting, please. Thank you.
And I might just ask members to wait. clarify a little bit more what you mean by including their comments in the next agenda topic?
Of course, the Friends of Clark County and Alliance for Community Engagement have reached out to their advocates, their people that are in their groups, and they have comprised some policy recommendations for the CAG to look at and for everyone to look at. And so I was hoping that could also be included into the conversation for when we meet next time. Thank you.
And did you want to include that as like a document to send out to the rest of the
Hey,
CAG
Sylvia.
or as a discussion? Yeah.
Sorry, this is
Oh.
Jenna. Those are in the public comments that were provided to the CAG before this meeting. So I think if I may make a process recommendation, I think it is up to the CAG to review the comments, as part of their meeting prep. And that the appropriate way to incorporate them into the process is to consider them as you're doing your recommendations and negotiating with the group on the policy list. So I think rather than having a separate conversation about a particular set of policies, I think it's up to individual CAG members to review them and bring them into their considerations with the group.
And then also we will be giving our edits or recommendations to you all in March. And so you all will be seeing that as well. So I'll just like uplift their voices as well in my comments to you all.
Yeah, that sounds appropriate. I think as you all make your comments on the goals and policies, if there's places where you see that there's something that members of the public or your groups believe or want to see included and it's not included in here, that would be appropriate to bring in those voices here
Perfect.
in your comments though,
Yes.
rather than, yeah, right.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, Nick?
Nick Massey. I just want to clarify, are you adding more goals?
Suggesting them to be reviewed for consideration, but yes, they are more goals.
I think it's a little late at this point. I mean, are we going to allow everybody to bring more goals into this, give everybody the same kind of deals that they want to do? I mean, we have limited it down to 33 goals through a whole process of elimination. I'm concerned the timeline is not going to be allowed that. If those fit into existing goals that we have in place, I would certainly entertain them. But at the same time, reopening the discussion on these, I think it's premature. I don't think we should do that.
Also, to answer that, actually, yes, it is. In some of them, it is actually adding to already existing goals. And so it just makes the language stronger for them. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And of course, any goals or policies will be discussed by the full CAG, right? Whether they're moving forward as a recommendation. So if it does feel late in the process, I think that's a great comment, Nick, that we've had a lot of discussion with the CAG and have refined where we're going. And so that will definitely be part of the conversation. Anne, and then go ahead, Anne, and then I'll make another comment.
This is Ann. I was actually going to answer a question, Nick, that you asked in the front part of your comment. Are we going to allow anybody to add to the existing list? And I would say the answer has always got to be yes. It's a public process.
All right. Thank you, Anne.
And we accommodate that.
I agree. Thank you.
Great. And we will have the second half of today's meeting is about our process for looking at the goals and policies as a CAG and coming to agreement. So we can talk more about this later today when we go over that process. Does that work? Okay. All right, back to you, Jenna.
Okay, I'm just writing myself a note. I'll go to the next slide. So I'm now going to walk through each of the groups that's provided feedback or whose feedback has been considered in the past couple months. Just give a highlight or two and an example or two of how that has impacted some policy revisions. So for our public engagement work, this happened throughout all of last year. We had 4 phases of engagement. two phases related to resilience, two phases related to greenhouse gas reduction. And between the county and the EJC members who helped us with engagement work, we held over 90 activities over the course of last year. Things from surveys to focus groups to workshop type events. And we received feedback from approximately 2,000 people throughout those activities. So if you want to learn more, you can look in the engagement summaries, but lots of people interested and engaged and providing their thoughts to us. So I want to share an example of how some of that public feedback is showing up in the revised version of the goals and policies. So I think at first glance, if you looked at the revised policy list, you may think, gosh, these have changed a lot. Like there's a lot of bold text, which is highlighting changes. And I want to just, again, provide an example of why we made some of these changes. So on the left side of the screen is an example of a policy as it was written in October. So at that time, it said, encourage sustainable agricultural practices, including permaculture, crop diversity, seasonal eating, et cetera. And, when we were looking through these thousands and thousands of comments from community members, we would see concepts and ideas that maybe weren't explicitly showing up in a goal or policy, but we felt like could be implemented as part of a broad policy. So we tried to just bring in more people's voices and, expand on, in this case, it's sort of the list of things that are being provided here as an example. So the revised version does that. And I will also add, we know there was some concern over general terms like encourage and promote. So in this case, we also, adjusted the language at the beginning as well. So I'll just read through the revised version. So now it says, collaborate with partner agencies to expand community-wide education on regenerative and sustainable agricultural practices, including soil health, carbon sequestration, cover crops, agroforestry, permaculture, crop diversity, seasonal eating, water storage, and water conservation strategies, et cetera. So it still has the same core, policy as it was in October, but we did add, just some more concepts to better reflect a broader range of people's input. So that's an example, and you'll see a handful of policies where the revisions are like this. It was our attempt to bring in more people's ideas around an existing policy idea that you all had developed. Okay, so I think before, maybe pause there for any questions before I go to the next section.
Yeah, Monica?
I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep going then. So next, I want to talk a little bit more about what the Environmental Justice Coalition, or EJC, did over the past month and what it looked like. They were tasked to review these policies through an equity lens. So I want to explain how that worked and what happened and what came out of it. So just as a refresher, you all have seen these slides. I just want to ground us and remind us on why we did this as part of this project. So on this slide, we've got some excerpts from the climate legislation we are tasked with implementing, and I'll just highlight some of the language in it. So the new climate goal in the Growth Management Act says we need to ensure comprehensive plans advance environmental justice. And the climate and resilience element must avoid creating or worsening local climate impacts to vulnerable populations and overburdened communities. And then when it talks about the resilience sub-element, it specifically goes into the county must prioritize actions that benefit overburdened communities. And then I'm going to skip down to the bottom. For the greenhouse gas sub-element, it says the county must prioritize reductions that benefit overburdened communities to maximize the co-benefits of reduced air pollution and environmental justice. So it's very clear this is a requirement and mandate, through the state legislation, so that's part of the why, for why we're like, okay, we need to figure out how to do this as part of this project. And then also just a few reminders on definitions. So the term environmental justice, the state is providing us a definition. It speaks about the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people. It speaks about addressing disproportionate environmental and health impacts and prioritizing vulnerable populations and overburdened communities and the equitable distribution of resources and benefits. So this is the definition we're working with. And one of the reasons we created the Environmental Justice Coalition was to help us do this, right? Their job was to help the county do engagement with more vulnerable populations, and then to help review policies with an equity lens to think about, who's going to be impacted by these policies. And then also just really quick as a reminder, the state also provides us with a definition of what a vulnerable population is. These are population groups more likely to be at higher risk for poor health outcomes in response to environmental harms. And there's some examples there, such as racial or ethnic minorities, low-income populations, and populations disproportionately impacted by environmental harms. And then the term overburdened community, also defined by the state. When we say overburdened community, it's talking about the place or the geographic area where vulnerable populations are facing combined multiple environmental harms and impacts. So I wanted to just provide a visual for that. I don't think this group has looked at this map yet, so I wanted to make sure I introduced it. This is produced by the Washington State Department of Health. It's called the Environmental Health Disparities Map. It looks at, by census tract, it looks at various factors, like income level and language spoken, and then also pulls in environmental data like air quality and things like that. And so when looking at this map, the darker purple means more burden. The lighter color means less burden. So, and we've grayed out the cities because the county doesn't plan for the cities. So if you look at this, right, the darker purple areas, are extending from Fruit Valley and Hazeldale towards Minnehaha, over towards Orchards, kind of along the top of the city of Vancouver for the most part, and then over a little bit to the side of Washougal as well. So when we're talking about overburdened communities, the state's tool is telling us these areas are generally more burdened than other areas in the county. Okay, so back to what did the EJC do with the equity lens now that we've revisited those terms? So
Just a pause. Go ahead, Noelle.
And I'm sure this is review, but clarify burdened. Like, do we have a working definition for burden?
yeah, so it's basically, so this definition here, which is from the Growth Management Act, it then points to how to explain that. It basically gives a long list of what is considered burden. It includes things from, ability to afford housing, utility costs, food, things like that. So it is a fairly extensive list that I, off the top of my head, can't summarize very well, but can provide that. So it's a pretty, I would say it's a pretty broadly defined term in terms of what the burden is considering. But it's not clearly defined as like you're paying more than X% of your income, for housing or for your utility bills.
Okay. I guess just in terms of now seeing a map, trying to correlate that with this list of what makes you overburdened was, anyways, it would be nice to see that list, I think.
Sure.
For me.
And the other thing I would add, Noelle, is the state legislation basically is using the term overburdened community and vulnerable populations interchangeably. And I can't remember if that's in the guidance or in the legislation itself, but it basically says we use these interchangeably. So, so anyway, we can provide more additional information on how that's being defined. I'm going to keep going. So the equity lens that was developed for this project, the EJC worked on that with county staff, and I think we showed a version of it to you all, but it was many months ago. So just as a recap, there's three main questions in it. The first is, who is most impacted by this issue or decision, positively or negatively? The second is, what does the data tell us, considering qualitative and quantitative data? And the third is, what are the ways in which a policy recommendation could be modified to enhance positive impacts or reduce negative impacts? So these were our three guiding questions. So what we did is staff drafted some memos that help summarize project information that relate to the first two questions. And then the EJC spent 2 meetings discussing the draft policies in regards to that third question. So they really were looking at the policies, thinking about how can these be modified or enhanced to improve positive impacts or reduce negative impacts. So those memos are available in your background materials if you want more details. I just thought I'd highlight one example of something you can find in them that I thought was fairly striking. So again, just on the left, here's the health disparities map where the darker purple shows the more burdened areas of our community. And on the right, this is showing some air quality data. It's looking at fine particulate matter, which is one type of, one issue with air quality that we have here. And in this case, the darker green shows worse air quality in the county. And you can see that there's quite a bit of overlap of where the purple and the green are showing up on each map, right? In that generally the air quality is worse in, sort of along the edge of the city of Vancouver. That dark green area right there in the middle is Minnehaha. And then fairly similar overlap to where the darker purple areas are on the other map. So just an example, you can read more in those memos if you are interested. Okay, so.
Oh, just a quick pause. Go ahead, Brent.
This is Brent Marsden. You keep talking about this packet that we have and all the stuff that we have. Do we have hard copies of all this, or is it just available for downloads? Because I'm not sure I'm seeing all this stuff.
Right. I have printed some of the items. They're over there on the other side from the food, if you would like them. I did not print everything. And if you want me to print other things for you, I can. Some of our tables are so big, they do not print particularly well. So but we could send you the Excel version or something that is more viewable that way. Okay, so I'm going to shift to talking about how we, what we did with the feedback that we received from the EJC. One way that their feedback shows up is in 2 overarching equity goals. And they're up there on the screen, and I'll read them. The first is facilitate a just transition to net zero greenhouse gas emissions and equitably enhance community and ecological resilience to climate impacts. And there's a couple of policies under that goal. And then the second goal is to advance environmental justice through the Clark County Comprehensive Growth Management Plan and associated plans, policies, development regulations, and strategies. And there's a couple of policies under that goal as well. So our initial intent with the EJC was to write, have one overarching equity goal with some policies that were capturing these recurring themes that were coming up over and over again in the feedback we were getting from the EJC. But we ended up with 2 because we were struggling with this idea that environmental justice is showing up for the first time in this legislation for planning to address, but environmental justice isn't just about climate change, right? It addresses any environmental impacts for any project. And so in just thinking about how our comprehensive plan is organized, we decided to split it in two, where that first goal will live in the new climate chapter, and the second goal would live in the environment chapter in our comprehensive plan. So this really was an organizational decision on why we created two instead of one goal. So these are now goal 1 and goal 2 on the goal and policy list. So these are our new items. And then equity considerations also are showing up throughout the list in many policies. And then there's a few examples where we just created a new policy with equity considerations that apply to all the policies under that goal. So I'll give you an example of that. The one other thing I wanted to say around the EJC's feedback as it relates to equity is that our expectation is that this group, the CAG, are really supportive of the EJC having taken the lead with this equity work. They did a lot of engagement with a lot of people in our community who are fairly vulnerable, and gave a lot of feedback thinking through that equity lens. And so our expectation is that you do really listen to them, right, in terms of that equity perspective as you review and consider those goals and policies. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so I'm going to give a few examples of how their feedback is showing up in the revised list. The policy I have up here, it fits under one of the tree planting goals, generally saying plant more trees. And we wrote a new policy that says policies under this goal should be implemented in collaboration with community-based organizations, tribes, and partner agencies in culturally relevant and accessible ways, to link with other efforts such as those related to job creation, workforce development, conservation and education initiatives, and to include homeowner, landowner, and renter opportunities to create habitat dispersal, corridors, and connectivity. So you'll see some new policies like this where, again, we were repeating ourselves so much, it made more sense to just create a standalone policy and said, okay, everything under this goal, think about these things or incorporate these things, as opposed to writing these items for every policy under that goal. So you'll see some of these on the list. And let me pause there.
All right, thanks, Jenna. Yeah, so Jenna went through a lot of information on how the Environmental Justice Coalition was engaged and kind of updated or provided additional policies and language with that environmental justice equity lens and the development of kind of those two overarching equity goals. So I just want to see if folks have any questions about that before we move into additional sources of input that influence the goals and policies. Yeah, Monica, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a clarification on something that was before. I agree with you that that if we are getting more input from the community, like not everybody learns of these meetings at the same time. And there's personal things that happen to people. I mean, I missed a big chunk last year due to personal family things. And so nobody has the same story. And so I just want us to be aware and have grace with people that are like, oh, wait, I just learned about this. I want to be involved and not just make a set, well, you missed the deadline kind of thing, because that just, I feel, makes them feel excluded from the process. But also I wanted to clarify that they are mostly modifications from the ACE and the FOCC. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Monica. Others? All right. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, this is Dave Rose. Sorry about the late coming to the meeting. I had to unload 3,000 pounds of railroad ties, and I ran a little bit longer than I thought. So I hope my neighbors don't mind.
Well, thanks for being here. All right, back to you, Jenna.
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears and talk about what the partner agency team shared with us as part of their review. So this group, again, these are folks who are technical experts in their field, so they know a lot about, if they work for a fish agency, they know a lot about fish, right? The folks who work for the port know a lot about the port and so forth. So we had a lot of just sort of technical experts reviewing the list and chiming in on policies related to things that they work on. And, so much of their feedback is really going to help us with implementation once some policies are approved. But I think in terms of revisions that we're considering right now, they did help identify some issues with consistency with certain state laws. So I will talk a bit about that in a moment, or major barriers to being able to move some of these policies forward, as well as opportunities, of things we can do to help implement them if they get approved. I think there were just a couple of gaps that stood out from the feedback from our partner agencies that did affect the policy revisions. I think most of their feedback helped us with clarifications to make them be more clear. But I wanted to give one example of a gap that came up that led us to revising the list. So one thing that stood out, both from some of our partner agency colleagues, particularly with the cities, and we also heard this through the public engagement feedback and EJC feedback, was an interest in better food security and access to affordable food in an emergency situation. So we did add a couple of new food security related policies to the list. One of those is up here on the screen that says plan for food access and availability, using local and regional food networks for food sales and distribution, such as farmers markets, farm stands, food hubs, food banks, and neighborhood food pantries that can be easily accessed throughout the county if there are climate disruptions to food delivery systems. So you'll see a couple of new food policies that you haven't looked at before.
Right, we'll pause to see if folks have any questions about the partner agency team feedback and process. Yeah, Anne, go ahead.
So just as it applies to Jenna, this example of a new policy. So, sorry. So are you saying that the partner review team, that came from the partner team?
Yeah, so in speaking with some of our city colleagues, I think they were highlighting that they're looking for, that they would feel like they would need county help with food security during an emergency, right? Because the cities, don't have as much land and things like that, and could be part of the system, but would want the county's help in a situation where there's major disruption to getting food here.
Right.
So it came up there, but it did come up it also came up through public engagement with the general public and with the EJC.
The big issue.
Yeah.
I was just sort of curious. So maybe you could just refresh us as to the categories of folks that are on the partner. What's the name? The partner team.
Yeah, so we have
I don't need the names, it just the.
Yeah, I'll give you some flavor. So we have a list of about 80 organizations. Not every agency provided feedback, but they were all invited to. So we have school districts on the list. So we heard from some of the school districts. We have fire districts, our cities, hospitals, utilities. We've got state agencies like Department of Health, Department of Ecology, Department of Natural Resources. We have CRESA, so like the 911 Center, and the Regional Transportation Council, so like our regional agencies. So hopefully that gives you a sense. And then the other big piece is we have folks from many of the county departments. So we had public works staff and community development staff also reviewing policies related to what they work on.
Thank you. So lots of different groups. Monica?
Yeah, it was sort of in line with that question too, because I'm like, does this get sent out to the partner agency? And then how many people are looking at it at that one partner agency? Is it just one? Is it like a team like you all? And so I just wanted to make sure that multiple people are seeing it and giving input because, you know, we all know different things. And so, yeah, was just, now I'm knowing there's like 90. How many actually gave input back of those 90 partner organizations?
Okay, this is a rough estimate off the top of my head. I would say 20 to 30 of the agencies probably gave us feedback. Yeah, and you know, this was again part of our, we design our project process and get county council's approval on that, like before we start the work. So this was part of that work. We outlined the agencies that we wanted to engage with, and each agency identified. They tell me who their point person is, and then they often will then, usually the point person is talking to their colleagues, you know, behind the scenes and then gets it back to me. So I don't even know the full extent of, you know, who within Clark PUD, for instance, looked at it, but I have my point person at Clark PUD who got me, you know, the feedback from their organization.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Thanks. Keep going.
Looks like there's a question online, Sylvia, from Don.
Oh, thank you. Let's go ahead, Don.
Yeah, this is Don Stanky. Can you give an example of where a climate disruption to food delivery systems is foreseeable? I'm thinking of two, like flooding would keep trucks coming down I-5 because the road would flood on I-5, and the other one would be fire. And maybe what kind of scenarios were you imagining?
Yeah, well, I think in talking with Dana about this topic, food security is interesting because it could be a local issue like you're sharing, Don, where like our transportation gets messed up and food can't get to the county. But it could also be an issue where, you know, something somewhere else in the world where we source our food, there's something happening there. And so there's suddenly not enough of some type of food, or there's like food issues. It could be disruption at a port, like the LA port or something like that. So it could be a climate issue somewhere else that ends up impacting us. So this is it's maybe one of the only topics actually on our list where it's like, it could be a local issue, but it could also be an issue somewhere else. And we want to make sure we can be, you know, more self-reliant and take care of ourselves if we need to.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll next talk about our technical consultant teams and what they have been up to. So just a quick recap. If you remember, last fall, our technical teams did what we were calling a level 1 analysis, which was a really high level evaluation of the draft policy list at the time across 7 criteria. You all voted on how to weight those criteria so we could produce a score for each policy. And the highest scoring policies were what we call, these are going to be our priority policies, which we're going to look at more closely because we don't have enough resources to study every single policy on the list in more detail. That happened in the fall. I know we didn't talk a whole lot about the output from that analysis. I did print copies of it. Those are on this table up here for those of you in the room. If you do want to look at those more closely and you didn't get a chance to before. But then since then, over the past couple months, Tracy and Dana's teams have been doing the level 2 analysis on those priority policies. So this is where they were looking in more detail and providing more information across some of those criteria for those priority policies. One thing I would note, so it's 5 criteria covered in both resilience and greenhouse gas policies. And then there's a 6th criteria for greenhouse gas reduction, where there is an actual calculated effectiveness of greenhouse gas emissions reduction potential on that greenhouse gas as part of that analysis. So that's in there. So for those of you who like numbers and want to see a number associated with a policy on the impact it could have, that is a table I would recommend that you look at, so you can see sort of the relative impact of the different policies on that list that they could have on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. I also wanted to note that, you know, even though this is a deeper dive on some of these policies, it's still fairly high level, right? We aren't talking about a specific project, so it's really hard to quantify and analyze something in a lot of detail. So we do have some more cost information, for instance, you know, we have notes on who would bear the cost. Is it an upfront cost? Would it be cost savings over time? Things like that. But we don't have like a number, you know, amount of money it will cost to do X, because these are such high level policies. We'd just be making things up if we were trying to quantify it in that much detail. So I just wanted to set the expectation that there's more information on these policies, but it's still fairly high level. The level 2 analysis tables are really big. I couldn't figure out how to print them well, but I did print on really big paper. I brought them with me. So if at a break or something, anyone wants to look at them, Tracy and I are happy to at least pull out the table, show you how to read it, you know, that kind of thing. But otherwise, I think looking at it online is probably the best way to look at that information. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we know some of you are more detail people and some of you are not. So please, you know, use these as they are helpful to you, because we realize everybody thinks, you know, about things differently. So based on this analysis work, there weren't really any major surprises, right? Like, and part of that is we'd already gone through a prioritization process. We knew these were going to be fairly helpful policies across the board. So I don't think we did any revisions based on the results of the analyses. The one thing that I will talk about more this evening is we did note some of those policies are potentially impacted by Initiative 2066. So again, I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So we may not have county authority to implement them based on how they're written. So we've noted that, but we haven't actually addressed that issue yet. So I think that's maybe the one thing in the analyses that could affect how the policies are revised. But otherwise, you know, these analyses are a resource to you as you consider policies and decide if you want to recommend them to move forward. And they're also going to be really helpful to staff once we get to implementation as well. And I want to pass it to Tracy for just a moment to just talk about what's coming next for greenhouse gas emissions reduction.
Thanks, Jenna. So the analysis is almost complete for the greenhouse gas emissions reduction section. The one thing that is remaining is to set interim greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. So Commerce has set the overall state goal of getting to net zero by 2050. And so the interim targets are really looking at those milestones along the way and the ability to track how is Clark County doing overall in reaching its that end goal, and you know, kind of time bound. Are we on track? Are we not? So we'll be looking at the state level policies and the different sectors of emissions, and looking at different potential milestones to set for those interim targets. And sorry, there will be we'll have a little bit of further discussion about that at the next CAG meeting.
All right, thank you. I saw a couple of questions. Was it Monica?
I just wanted to say thank you, Tracy, for that, because I was like, where are the targets here? And so I'm like, all right, there they are. Thank you.
All right. Well, any other questions on what the technical consultants did and kind of how that has shaped what's happening moving forward?
Hi, this is Terry Tolan. Just a question about when this occurred. Was this during the break period from October?
Yes, it was during the break period.
Very good. Thanks.
All right. Next, I'm going to talk about what county staff have been up to over the past few months. So I kind of said we were kind of had a lot of miscellaneous tasks. We were compiling everybody else's feedback and trying to figure out what to do with it. But we were also looking at things like, okay, can we legally do this? Is this consistent with state law? Do we need to, how do we align better with other parts of the Growth Management Act and things like that? So we reviewed the policies in a few different ways. I'm going to give a few updates related to the things we did and then just show a few more examples of policy revisions based on that work. So I want to talk about I-2066, which I think at least some of you are familiar with. So this was a ballot initiative that was approved in the November 2024 general election. It is in regards to protecting access to natural gas. I have an excerpt from it up on the screen that I'll read. It says, "A county shall not in any way prohibit, penalize, or discourage the use of gas for any form of heating or for uses related to any appliance or equipment in any building." And so, in reviewing our draft policy list, after this passed in relationship to the wording in this initiative, we have identified several policies that we think potentially need to be reworded or reframed in some way to be consistent with this initiative. And we are waiting on some additional guidance on how to do this, because now we need to be consistent with this initiative, but we still need to be consistent with House Bill 1181, which says reduce your greenhouse gas emissions to zero. So we're looking for state guidance on how they expect us to do that. So we have a plan, and I'm going to share on our next slide. And I guess I will also mention, there are some lawsuits underway on the initiative. We have no idea what the timeline is on whether or not or how they'll be resolved. So at this moment, right, our job is to be consistent with current law. And if the laws change in the future, we deal with that then. So our plan is Department of Commerce staff told me I should expect some guidance by the end of the month. And so based on that, we would like to review that guidance once we have it, and then try to figure out some possible revisions to the building and energy policies based on that guidance. We are interested in having a subcommittee of a few members from this group who can work with staff on those revisions so that we can sort of have at least a couple people to vet ideas with before we meet, and then meet next in February, when we would present back to this group, propose revisions to that list of policies. So that would be at your February meeting. And then we would have you all weigh in further on those policies between your February and March meetings, so we can understand where's their agreement, where there's still sticking issues. And then your March, your last meeting, would be sort of the final negotiation and discussions on the building and energy policies. So that's our plan based on the information we're waiting for to help us figure out how to do these revisions. And later on, Sylvia is going to explain that we're going to have a survey that's going to go out after this meeting. And I just wanted to note that that survey will not include any of the building and energy policies. We're going to kind of separate them out onto their own timeline because we know we need to revise them. So it doesn't make sense to sort of consider them further until we do that. So I think I'll pause there and see if there are questions.
Yeah, perfect. Any questions on I-2066 or any of the other county? I'll go to Noel first and then to Monica.
I just am wondering how you plan to choose the 2 to 3 people for the subcommittee. if you're asking for volunteers, would
Yes.
certainly volunteer myself. So
I would just add, we're interested in volunteers and we want to make sure we have differences of perspectives in the group. So that's our one request.
I will add one perspective. How about that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Let's get through the questions if folks have them on this, and then we can see who would like to volunteer for the subcommittee. I think if it ends up being way too many people, we'll have to figure out what to do because it is a subgroup, not the full committee. And of course, the ideas and whatever that subcommittee comes up with are then going to go to the full CAG. So everybody will still get a chance, of course, to weigh in on the buildings and energy policies. So go ahead, Monica.
So with that, like, yeah, how is 3 the max number of people that you want to get?
Let's get there when we see how many
Okay,
volunteers.
Because
we
yeah,
get.
I'm also wanting to volunteer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And Nick, no questions. Okay. So maybe just, yeah, if anyone wants to volunteer for this subgroup, maybe just raise your tent card. And again, you'd be meeting in early February with the purpose of reviewing the guidance on I-2066 and maybe revising the building and energy policies in response to that. So I see, I'll just write down names. And if you're online and are interested, please just go ahead and raise your hand in the platform or just go off mute and say so. Okay, well, Monica. So I just see the 2 right now, Noelle and Monica.
Don Stanky.
And Dawn, perfect. Thank you, Dawn.
This is Nick Massey. Nelson Holmberg, I don't know if he's on or not, but I would like to recommend him be on that
Okay,
committee.
we can check. Nelson, you are online, I believe. We can circle back. Let's circle back to this at the very end of the meeting in our next steps, just if anyone, feels like you're like, actually, I do want to be part of that. We can check back and we'll check with Nelson at that time too. All right. Thank you. I think that's good. Keep going.
All right. Okay, next I wanted to circle back on word choice. This was something that came up at the October meeting. I think, Anne, you were probably the most vocal around just these general terms aren't very helpful for knowing how to hold the county accountable or knowing what the county is going to do. So I just wanted to speak to that. Although actually, before I forget, I did want to note back to the natural gas initiative that also at the October meeting, there were several policies where it was like, well, keep it on the list for now, but let's revisit it. I think there's a lot of overlap between those items and what we now need to revise. So I just want to mention we haven't forgotten that. We will come back to it, but we're going to wait till we do the revisions. Okay. So then one of the other things that came up in October was these generic words. And so I just wanted to share sort of what we've done with that. So, as staff were proposing revisions to policies based on the various sources of feedback, we did often update the wording to try to be more specific. So there's less of those words than there used to be on the list, but it's still there in some places. I didn't go through everywhere to try to eliminate those words. So, but there is a lot less of it than there was. And I think so we are open as you all consider, what you want to move forward, or if there's some tweaks to policies that you want to recommend. If the wording is really hanging you up, you're welcome to make suggestions as part of that process. And I think the one thing we just want to flag is that staff, we just need to make sure that whatever the wording is consistent with what the county can do, with the county's authority. So we did get some feedback from EJC members, they really want to see the county implement something. And we're looking at the policy and we're like, well, the county actually can't implement that thing because it's, it's not within the, so anyway, we just want staff will need to verify that whatever your wording suggestion is, the county can actually do, but you're welcome to make suggestions as we move forward.
All right, Nick, you have your tent card up.
Nick Massey, I assume this is attorneys that are on staff because we're going to have to codify this, correct?
The plan doesn't get codified. The attorneys will be reviewing. Yes, and they won't do their final review till you all are totally done, but we can check with them along the way on certain issues.
Great. And Dawn?
Yes, this is Don Stanky. The very first word in the document, on the side-by-side document for January 22, says facilitate. I would like something stronger than facilitate. Like I would like promote. Because facilitate is passive. More promote is more assertive, and facilitate is too passive for me. And so, since we're talking about word choices, I'd like to offer that.
Great. Thank you, Dawn. And we will be getting to those conversations later, but that's a good example of the word choice concern. Thanks. And Monica?
And also, I was another person that was very vocal about the word choicing. I went through every single word in the policy when it came to us. I was like, no, not strong enough, not strong enough, not strong enough. And they got multiple pages of notes from me. So I'm with you on that one. And I use a thesaurus. So I'm like, what's the strongest one here? So just to let you know that, yeah, I want to make sure that we can make the best policy possible for our community. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to keep going then, but I wanted to just make sure I circled back to this topic. And I want to just give a couple more examples of revisions or new policies you'll see on the list. In general, we have tried to stay away from using jargony words, but I did introduce a new one in this policy, so I did want to explain it. And I will say we did create a glossary that is in your background materials, and I did print that for those of you in the room if you'd like a copy. It's up here. So I just wanted to introduce this new concept to you all. We heard from in the public feedback, there was interest in, having, people were like, can I just call a phone number to help me with my transportation needs? Like I just say, I want to go here and they can tell me all my options, particularly for people who don't have access to a car. And, if you think about Google Maps, right, can give you how long it'll take driving versus walking versus riding your bike type options. There's this concept called mobility as a service, which the idea is to have one coordinated system that has all the information for all of your transportation options, so from your Ubers and your Lyfts to your buses to your community transportation and specialized transportation providers. So did use that term in this policy to address that feedback that we heard. But I know generally you all have not been a fan of us using sort of plannery terms. So this was, I think, the one new addition. So anyway, so that's what this new policy here is about. So I'll just read it really quick. Collaborate with agency and community partners to improve accessible and coordinated comprehensive transportation services throughout the county based on universal mobility as a service principles. So any questions on that before I go to the next example? Okay, and then one other thing that we were doing in revising the list is, we were reviewing all of this feedback and people would bring things up and we'd be like, oh, well, we already have a policy about that somewhere else. And it happened quite a bit. And so we did add a couple of policies where we just listed out, to acknowledge that, the county has a complete streets policy already, for instance. We are noting it as a new cross-reference. And I know if you all look at this, it doesn't mean anything because it's just a list of numbers, right? And citations to policies in this big document. But wanted to sort of show how we are, again, we want to acknowledge people's feedback. They brought something up that was climate related that we could count as a climate policy. The county already has policies related to it. So we can point to them and say, hey, this is also a climate policy. And these are already adopted policies by the county. So even if you all don't like them, they already exist, right, as a county policy. So We're sharing to be sort of transparent on how we are doing that. And you'll see this in just a couple places, but this was our way to, again, point to existing policies that are relevant, but we are not trying to revise every chapter in the comprehensive plan, you know, as part of this project. Like we need some boundaries on the, you know, the climate chapter can't revise everything. So we're sharing these, they're on the list, but even if you all voted not to recommend, like you didn't like something that was being pointed to, it still already is an adopted policy. So I just wanted to point that out because it's kind of a new thing that you'll see in a couple places on the list. Questions about this?
I think no questions. Keep going.
Okay, so let's just talk about this revised list in sort of big picture one more time. If you're online and you look at that side-by-side document, or if you're in the room and you have the big table, I just want to walk through it. So, and maybe I should have done this at the beginning before talking for an hour plus, but I'll just want to walk through each column so you know exactly what is in that document. So on the leftmost side is the sorting order column, which is just a numbering system of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just gives us a reference. The second column over says sub-element. So that's where we have indicated if the policy is a greenhouse gas reduction policy. If it is, it says GHG. If it's a resilience policy, it says RES, RES. If it's both, it will say both. So that's how we are tracking which policies relate to which sub-element. The third column over is the category. I mentioned we have 7 categories we use to organize. So that's where you'll see health and well-being or green jobs or building and energy. The fourth column over, the one that says October version of climate element goals and policies, that is what the policy looked like after your October meeting. If the policy didn't exist yet, it says new there. The 1/22/25 version of draft climate element goals and policies is the most recent version of the list with all of these revisions that we've been talking about. The bold text is just to help indicate changes that have been made. So if the new policy, all the text is bold. And then the next column is the summary of changes made to proposed goal and policy from the October 2024 version. So this is the high-level explanation of, you know, this is a new policy because of X, or we changed this because of Y. The more the details behind, you know, that high-level summary are in our comment trackers and things like that. So if you do have questions, staff, we're happy to help dig in to find the details behind that statement. The next column over says tentative comp plan chapter location. We're just sharing this. This is, as staff, we are trying to think through, again, the organization and where these goals and policies will live. You know, is it in the climate chapter, or, you know, in some cases, the policies really actually make sense to live in a different chapter in the comp plan. So again, it's mostly an organizational thing, but sharing in case you're curious. And then the furthest column to the right, where you'll see like G1, G1-P1, and so forth, is just our updated goal and policy numbering for the list. So any questions on how to read that document? I know it's a lot of text on a piece of paper, so I do recommend using the Excel version online if you can. But
Thanks so much, Jenna. Yeah, see 10 cards from Nick and then Monica.
Nick Massey. These first 2 pages, are they supposed to be yellow?
Thank you. The coloring. The yellow is highlighting the policies that were priority policies as a result of the prioritization. So if something is yellow, was either in the top 15 scoring for greenhouse gas reduction or resilience, The printer did do something weird where the gray lines look kind of red. That's just supposed to be gray. That doesn't actually mean anything. On the pages where there's yellow. So thank you.
Thanks, Nick. And Monica?
Mine's a question of how you, because so let me just start with how I am putting my notes for this. I circle the number, like let's say number 1, I circle it, and then I put it in my Google Notes, and then I put it in my Google Notes as 1, and then I go over to G1, and then I'm organizing it like that. Would you like also for there to be the G1, like let's say if it had like a P1 next to it, would you like also that to be in the notes? Or is it just sufficient enough to have the number 1 policy and then like the G1 after that?
Let's go over that in just a second. We have a survey that we're going to use to capture feedback. So how about we go through our tool and then we can circle back to that question. Does that work?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I can answer a question. That's a sorting order, that number 1. So it'll be a unique number.
Okay. All right, Anne?
Jenna, did I hear you say there are 15 priorities? This is Ann Foster, I'm sorry. Did you, was there a fixed number of those in yellow?
Yeah, so
So we can't add,
right. So and the prioritization was we needed to do that because our technical teams had limited resources on policies to study
right,
more closely, but it doesn't give them more or less weight on the list or anything like that. So we have more information on those yellow highlighted policies than the others. But anyway, it doesn't mean they're more important for implementation or for moving forward or things like that.
okay.
And there are 15 priority greenhouse gas policies and I think 16 priority resilience policies. So 31 total yellow.
Tracy, can you say that again, please?
During the first phase prioritization, we identified 15 priority greenhouse gas policies that got that second level analysis. And there was a tie in resilience. So they ended up with 16 on that list that are the priority. So you should find 31 yellow policies in the list.
Because when we looked at this from the, and as I recall, identified when we rated them, essentially, that was a while ago. I mean, that was August, September?
Yeah, so it was, and so we worked off the list at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I guess I would say you don't need to really put more credence or weight into them. Just know that we only have more analysis information on those ones.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Any other questions on, the side-by-side comparison document or really anything else that Jenna went over the last hour? Okay. Well, we are miraculously, as never before has happened, slightly ahead of schedule. Just going to point that out. Great job. Let's take a break and then we'll get back together. Are we doing a 10-minute break? Let's get back together. Have a little bit longer break. I don't know. Maybe people want some food and get back together at 7:20. And at that time, we'll go over the process for what we're going to be doing between now and next meeting and over the next couple of meetings to get a recommendation that's going to go to Planning Commission and Council. So get ready for that and we'll see you at 7:20. All right, folks, we're going to get started again here. Okay. All right, welcome back. We have most folks, maybe Monica's, hopefully will be back soon. Okay, so we just heard from Jenna a lot about how the goals and policies have been updated based on a tremendous amount of work that has happened over the past couple of months and engagement over the past year. So now we're going to get into what is this group going to be doing moving forward? So we know that, you know, your goal is to make a recommendation to Planning Council and Planning Commission and County Council on a set of goals and policies for the climate element. So we're going to talk about how we're going to get there. So let's go to the next slide. So today we really want to make sure that we're clear on kind of the process for coming to consensus and what consensus means. After today's meeting, we're going to use a survey as the key tool to gather your ideas and initial thoughts on how aligned you are with all of the goals and policies, and kind of use that as our tool for the upcoming meetings. Except for the building and energy policies, because those will be dealt with in the subcommittee and then come back to the CAG as Jenna described a little bit earlier. So let's go to the next slide. And this is just a reminder about, you know, what brought us here as a group. And this is kind of the grounding as we get into the consensus building process. Just a reminder that, you know, we're here because House Bill 1181 directed unincorporated Clark County to have this, to implement and create a climate chapter, which will include a resilience sub-element and a greenhouse gas reduction sub-element. And so the goals and policies that this group recommends to move forward really should align with what's on this screen, as well as what's important to you. So kind of keeping both of those things in mind is going to be really important. So, you know, you have your own interests, maybe groups that you represent, things that you want to see in the county, and all of that is valid. And you come for your own perspectives. And also the goals and policies should identify, protect, enhance natural areas, protect community resilience, address natural hazards, prioritize actions that benefit overburdened communities, and then also reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero, reduce vehicle miles traveled, and prioritize reductions for overburdened communities. So it's a lot to keep in mind as you're kind of going through these goals and policies, but that really was your charge, and your charge was a hefty one, a lofty one. And so this is kind of where it all is going to come together for you all, bringing your interests together with what you were directed to do from the House bill. So let's go to the next slide. So what does consensus mean? We're moving into now kind of going through the goals and policies and deciding which ones there is consensus on. So for a working definition of what consensus is for this group, it's kind of getting as close to unanimous agreement as possible. And it means that you can live with the outcome as, even if it's not your first choice, but you can live with the outcome and that it's generally aligned with your needs and interests. So, you know, for example, it might be going, if you're looking at the goals and policies and you see one and you say, you know, I wish there was a word a little different here, but generally, if this were proposed to the Planning Commission, I could support it. I could live with it. It aligns with what I care about. That would mean like you're aligned with that. And if all of you have that sort of level of alignment, then that would be a goal or policy on which we have consensus. That's kind of what consensus means in this world. Yeah, I'll stop for questions as we go. Go ahead, Brent.
Brent Marsden, you mentioned which of these we will reach consensus on. So is it assumed that some of them we might not be able to reach a consensus? And this is this effectively a veto from someone?
That is a great question. And I'm going to go over that, I think, in the very next slide. Let's go to the next one.
Actually, Sylvia, did you want me to chime in
Yes,
a little
it
bit
was
more on that
the
last
next
one?
slide. Why don't you go over that?
Okay, I'll talk and then it'll go back to Sylvia. So Sylvia asked me just to expand a little bit more on the like, why as a county we pursued, this project through a consensus-based approach and our interest in doing this. I think when we were thinking about how we were going to do this climate project, we were thinking about consensus might be a really good approach because we know this is a really complicated project, right? We know there's a lot of different, it touches so many things. There's so many different interests and perspectives in our community on it. And we also have this mandate from the state that needs us to move really quickly, right? Once we approve something. So our interest in, is it possible to create a unified front from a group of people who have really different interests? So that not only, do we have a group that's talked through the issues, hashed out the details, and can make a unified recommendation to the Planning Commission and County Council, like that would be pretty amazing. We don't know if it's possible, but I think we like the idea of really listening to everyone's voices and trying to work through those differences to be able to present a unified recommendation. With that said, our county council did approve this approach before we, move forward with it at the beginning of the process. And, they did also ask if the group can't reach agreement on certain things, they are interested in seeing what those differences are. So Sylvia will expand on this a little bit, but so we will share with them, hey, here's where the group is in agreement. And then if there are items that, there isn't consensus on, we will document that, right? And that will be available to the decision makers to consider as well. But back to you, Sylvia.
That's great. Thank you. Nick?
Nick Massey. I entered in this really leery of this process. Since that time, I have changed my mind 180 degrees. I think the goal of this committee has been to have, and I've said this in council meetings in front of council, that if we get everybody in the room, we can come up with a good decision. It's not going to be the best for everybody. It's not going to be mine. It's not going to be yours, but it's going to be ours. And so I'm making my goal to conform with this and come up with the best decision necessary to move forward with it. That doesn't mean I'm still not as passionate on the issues that I am on this thing, but at the same time, I want to hear what everybody else says. I've realized as a group here, we all have a voice in this. So I think, Jenna, your choice of this is well-founded. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Nick. And I think that really captures what we're talking about when we talk about consensus, right? Each of you come from your own points of view, your own interests, but you're not creating a climate element for Nick or a climate element for Brent, right? You're creating a climate element for unincorporated Clark County. So it's about what meets your interests, but also thinking about the broader picture and the needs of the greater community and kind of the mandates of the legislation. So really couldn't have said it better, Nick. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's go to the next slide, which is really important. If you didn't listen to anything today, please listen to this because these are the instructions for what we're doing for the next March through March. Okay. So after today's meeting, we are going to send out a survey and it's going to have, what did we say? We have 33 goals and 100 plus policies. It's going to have all of those goals and policies minus buildings and energy. And we're going to ask for your level of yes on each one. And I'll describe what that means in just a little bit. When we get back to our next meeting in February, for the ones where there's like really close to yes, we're going to barely talk about those. We're going to say, these are ones that we think everyone's in agreement. Can we say these are good and they're going forward as recommendation to council? And kind of just check mark those and congratulate ourselves for a job well done. And I'm not minimizing the value of discussion on, the sets of goals and policies that you agree to. It's just, you've already had those conversations, right? We had months of conversations, so we don't need to rehash things that we've talked about a lot. So we want to quickly check off where we have agreement. And then we will have deeper discussion on those where there is more concern. And it will really be incumbent on you all to come forward with, here's my concern and here's my proposal for how to fix it. Because we're at a point now where we need to have solutions on the table and figure out how are we modifying the language in a way that maybe we can get to consensus on some of the things where people have deeper concerns. So it'll be some hard work for you all and some deep digging on not just here's the gripe, but here's how to fix it as well. And then, you know, after all of that work, there will be that report out to decision makers. And so for those goals and policies that have consensus, those are moving forward as your recommendation. And then for those where we weren't able to get to consensus for you all, as Jenna described, your perspectives will still move forward. And it will be up to decision makers to decide kind of what to do with that, right? They'll hear, well, the group discussed these kinds of goals and policies. These were the different concerns with those goals and policies, and they'll decide what to do moving forward. So that's kind of the basic outline. Any questions about that before I move on? Yeah, Monica.
So when do you want those the yes survey to be completed before the next?
Yes, before the next meeting. I think on the next slide, there's more details on it. I think we said February 12th, maybe. Yeah, so, oh, it's not on the next slide, but by February 12th, we'll send out the survey, I think tomorrow. It's already been developed, maybe needs a few tweaks, but we'll send it out and then by February 12th.
Yeah, because that makes me go through all the, because I'm on policy 10, but then I've been making notes, but it's like now I'm going to go through every policy and just read them and say yes to this. And so that just makes it fit better in my head of what I need to do first.
Perfect.
Also, you said we were going to come back in March, and that's when we're going to be discussing what we want to be changed. Like this is what we think could be added or language changed in March.
Oh, I meant to say February.
February. Okay.
But we will also have March. So we'll have February and March for those discussions.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah.
Because we're not going to get through everything in one.
No. Yeah. It's taken me a time to just get to 10.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right. So let's go to the next slide. This is just a little bit more explanation about what's going to be on the survey. And I think we have time to do a practice survey question today and maybe even talk about some of the results. So for each of the goal, we're presenting the survey as kind of by goal area. So you'll see under each goal, it's like a goal and somewhere between 1, 3, 5 policies. So for each goal area, you'll be asked in the survey, what is your level of support for that one? And it's a scale of 1 to 4. 1 is, I support this. Like, I think this is awesome. No concerns. If you give it a 2, then it means I have some minor concerns, but I don't need to get into a big discussion with this, with the CAG on it. I can live with it moving forward. So this would be maybe there's some wording changes that you'd prefer to be different, but in general, you can live with it. And then if you give something a 3, it means that you have concerns and want to discuss it more with the CAG. And a 4 means this is a major problem. I can't live with this. We really need to talk about it at a CAG meeting. So that's the scale for the survey. And in the survey, if you give something a 3 or a 4, we ask that you say, which policy number do you have an issue with? And what ideas do you have for changing that? In the survey. Yeah, so there'll be space in the survey for you to write that down. And so when we come back at the next meeting, we'll have all of those results for you all to look at. Yeah. Next slide. Oh, go ahead, Nick.
Are these surveys, are they going to come out with our name on them when we get the results?
Yes.
I figured as much.
This is not a secret ballot group. Yeah, Monica?
Also, is there a character limit for, you know why?
I don't know.
I imagine there is. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. It's whatever SurveyMonkey lets us do. But I would, we're gonna have a lot of policies to discuss. So I recommend being succinct in your comments, right? If you have a policy you want to discuss or have concerns with, write it down. And I would say, focus on what is the recommended solution. We don't need a whole story on why, right? We want the proposed solution, right? Which it could be a word change. It could be could we add this to it, kind of thing. So we shouldn't need a big paragraph, right? So I guess, and Monica, happy to talk to you because I know you like to write a lot.
And I'll just leave that for like, here's my succinct comment, and then I'll have more to discuss with the CAG. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anne?
Ann Foster. So what was the most recent, I don't know how to ask the question. I noticed that there are some comments that were sent in, Jenna, probably to you, that I'm not seeing reflected on here. What was there a deadline? So
And are
anything
you-
you received before last Friday, for example?
And you're referencing public comments, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Well, yes. Well, I mean, even thinking of Don's email, Don Stanky's email, in which he was making some suggested changes. I don't see those suggested or reflected anyplace. So
Right.
if we had comments and we did send them in and they're not here, then is now a good time to bring them up, or should they?
bring them through this survey process.
To the survey process.
Into the survey process. So
Ah.
for these, we're going to keep getting public comments as you all move forward, but
Right.
staff, we're not going to touch the policies again until you all discuss and make recommendations and as a group agree on changes, right? So it's you all as a group, you need to, if you're seeing public comments you agree with and you want to elevate, you need to, as a member of the CAG, you need to bring it into the conversation
Okay.
yourself.
Okay.
Great, thank you for that. Let's go to the next slide. I thought there was a different slide. Okay, thank you. I think I already said all these pieces, but we'll have until February 12th for the survey, except for the building and energy policies, which will be talked about at the subcommittee. And so at our February CAG meeting, we'll review those results, kind of figure out where do we have consensus, and then try to talk about as many as we can where we can try to get to a consensus recommendation. And we may also see at that time whether additional subcommittees are needed. There may be some policies that are really close to there, but they just need a little bit more time. So at the February meeting, we might see, is there a group of folks that want to work on rewriting or modifying some set of goals and policies to bring back to the March meeting. So that might be an option as well. Okay, next slide. Oh, never mind, go back. So we're actually going to do a practice survey question. Do you want to pull up the survey? Do you mind passing these out to folks? And we're not going to necessarily, well, I'm going to say we're not going to hold you to what you say today, but maybe it depends on how the discussion goes. But we want to pull up one of the questions and just kind of practice answering it and then seeing what the conversation looks like after you respond to the question. And we're going to go down to goal 10. If you go down in the survey, so this is what the survey is going to look like. And if you're online, I'll give you instructions too. We're not going to actually do the survey in the tool. We're just going to do it through the chat or on pieces of paper for members that are in the room. I do not. So you're going to have to write. The most important thing that you're writing down though is your number. So make that clear. But we're going to go to goal 10. No, I'm sorry. Goal 10. If you want to prefer to look at it in your packet, if it's easier than looking at on the screen, it's on page 15. we're looking at goal 10, which is the green jobs goal. And so that one has, it's one goal and 3 policies. And we want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about, do you support this as written? Would you give it a 1, 2, 3, or a 4 based on the scale I just described? With like 1 is fully support, 2 is I can live with it, it's fine. 3 is I've got some concerns, 4 is I really need to talk about this one. And if you have some suggested ideas at this point for language changes, modifications, feel free to write that on your sheet too. If we'll give you a couple of minutes to do this, maybe like 5 or 10. How much time do we have? Maybe we'll give you till 7:50 so you can read it, think about it. If you're online, you can put your response in the chat. Do they chat to everyone still for this? Yeah. Okay, you do have to chat to everyone. And just put in like your number. So 1, 2, 3, or 4, your level of support for this one that's on the screen. And we're just practicing. Yeah, go ahead, Noelle.
Noelle Levern, are we just doing the goal or the goal and the?
We're doing the goal and the policies.
Okay.
So if you're giving it a 3 or a 4, write down the policy numbers or that you have an issue with.
Gotcha. Okay.
So this.
Order number 42.
Do folks online have any questions about this? And if you are online, just know it's one goal and then there's 3 policies under it. I don't know if you can see it all on the screen. Oh, they are showing up. Yeah. Okay. So it's basically all the text that's on the screen is what we're talking about. And so if you're giving it like a lower score, a 3 or a 4, then just indicate which policy number you have an issue with in your response.
Sylvia, can you, do you have the survey? Oh, this is the goal thing, to the 1 to 4 again?
Yeah,
Or you
can
can
you
just
scroll
read-
down a
just read it
tiny
out.
bit in the survey?
You can just read it. or
Yeah,
just-
so 1 is, I support it, it's great.
is.
2 is, I can live with it, it's fine. 3 is, I have concerns, and 4 is, I have real concerns.
Got it.
No.
I've got such a good attitude here. I can't
Yeah.
believe you would even say
Yeah, I
that.
don't even know you.
I know. Well, I wrote a headline for my ICC thing and it made me realize. Hard-nosed Nick turns into a champion of consensus making process.
No, wait. Seriously, you been. Really,
What?
I applaud you.
Hard-nosed Nick turned into a champion for consensus-based meetings.
Otherwise known as Nick 180 degrees. That's
Well, if you've
I'm
ever
on your
sit through a
side.
Q-out session with Sylvia, you'd change your mind too.
Being informed. You were scared straight.
Oh,
Right.
Oh, but the way you reacted, what?
and Ann Foster can chew you out with just one look.
I
You just
know,
went,
right?
Oh,
Boy,
crap,
do
what
I.
did do now?
Again, 4th grade. I know.
It's a calming influence. on you.
Jen, I'm gonna file complaint here. Yeah. All for the best.
All right. Okay, we're gonna rein it in a little bit. I think everyone's done. So thank you for participating in that. So the results, I just kind of have them all in front of me. We have mostly 1s and 2s from everyone, and there are 3 of you that gave at least 1 policy or goal, a 3 or a 4. So in this case, this is a group of goals and policies that we would discuss as a CAG to see, are there ways we can update some of the goals, some of the language to better align with folks that have concerns and see if we can get to a consensus recommendation. I don't know if I want to make you all have that discussion today because we weren't necessarily prepared for it, but I think this was just a good kind of preview of what's to come for the coming meetings. And I also want to encourage you, like we said before, come with succinct comments because there is a lot to get through. And think about, where do you really have concerns and where can you really just live with something? Because again, this is a consensus-based process. We're looking at the values and needs of everyone in the county while also meeting the House bill mandate. There's a lot to consider here. So just think about that too, and kind of the limited amount of time we have for discussion. Noelle?
So Noelle Levern, so how many sessions or what part of a session do we have to come to consensus?
We really have 2 meetings.
2 meetings.
Yeah.
It's not a lot.
That's 6 hours, but really not even all of the time in those 6
Yeah.
hours. So
Okay.
that's why we may need some subcommittees, but again, it's not a lot of time. So that's, again, the encouragement to kind of be succinct and think about what's really just kind of okay as it is to move forward. Yeah, Nick.
Thank you.
My question was the how. I mean, on P1, I'm a board member of WorkSource Washington. The county is not equipped to do this. But WorkSource Washington or these other nonprofit groups are equipped to do this. So that would be my point, that to support the development of local green and facility opportunities for the green jobs and everything. I mean, I think this is a great goal, but in fact, it needs to move to a separate department to manage, because you guys aren't in the people business, right?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what support would mean here?
Yeah, well, and I think Oh. No, that's fine. But I agree with you, Nick, in that the county is not going to be the prime implementer of doing the workforce development unless it relates to county specific, jobs. But the county can play a role in, it can help convene like conversations, right? It can seek funding to support partner agencies, right? So it can play a role, a supportive role, right? But to your point, Anne, this isn't saying how, right? It's saying it's going to do something to help, but it's not explicitly telling you how as the policy is written.
I didn't have my mic on last time. Nick Massey, and I'm good with that answer.
Thank you. So, I mean, it sounds like in some cases, the word support does not sound like a large, a huge level of effort for the county, but in some cases it can't be because county doesn't have the authority or whatever. That's not their role.
Yeah, yes, this is Ann Foster, and the way Nick described it clarified it for me, so I'm okay with it now as is. Because support is actually meaning support. I mean, it's partnering with somebody else and providing support to somebody else. As opposed to implement and design and implement a plan that develops green jobs. We're not saying that. So that helped.
Okay.
Great.
I'm good with
That's
that.
helpful.
You
Okay.
can change my answer.
All right. I'll give you your sheet back. No, you can change it on the survey. Brent and then Noel.
This is Brent Marsden. And I'm asking for clarification on what we're just talking about. These particular terms, you mentioned that if you said a two, that might just involve word changes and you can live with it. But I'm not sure I can live with, some of these terms. So that would take it to a 3. Do you have a clarification on that? Because again, what Ann and Nick are talking about, sometimes it's context, where support in used a certain way can mean something and can be okay. So my concern is that I think a lot of this language is just really milquetoast, namby-pamby, says nothing. I mean, you're going to support something. What does that mean? To me, usually it means nothing. So I have a concern with that. So can you clarify, what would be a 2 and what would be a 3? And if they're for 3s with me, am I going to put in the language that I want with each one? Because you're looking at a whole lot of 3s otherwise. But, I want to do this right and I want it to be productive.
Yeah, before I answered, Nick, thoughts on that?
Here's my concern, Nick Massey. We've already went through a whole bunch of wordsmithing on these goals. Are we going to reopen this bag of worms again to spend all our times? And we can if we want to, but we're not going to get anywhere with the whole process if we worry about every single word meaning something to everybody. I mean, we got to have some kind of consensus to come up with that, that the synonyms of words or these words that are doing that kind of stuff comes in. So I think it would behoove all of us to come up with some words that would work for us in there, because it's going to come up time and time again. And if we go out through every goal and go through this exercise, we're going to be here till 2029 and still not have a plan.
Yeah. And Monica? I know, but since we're on this conversation, unless yours is related to this. Okay, go ahead then. Sorry.
So I took a little moment to use my thesaurus and look at some of these words. And I think that would help is just taking some time. Maybe we need to agree on what the definition we're using of support, promote, facilitate are, so that we have some sort of common ground, potentially.
Yeah, that's great. Monica?
So I wasn't around for the last part to like wordsmith with you all and everything. So that's why I'm like, oh, that word stands out to me. Oh, I think that could be stronger. Like in the beginning, the word facilitate, I looked up another word and it's accelerate, could be another word. And so even having in a glossary for the county, like how you said, what do all these words mean to us and what do they mean in this context, in this document, I think would be really helpful for people to know, like, this is what we meant. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jessica online?
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment, and I don't know if it's possible on the Survey Monkey itself. I was wondering if it would be possible to set it up so that you didn't have to complete the whole thing at one time, since it's going to be a lengthy review of all of the goals and policies. Like you could start it and it would save progress and stop. And then if it's possible to add a comment, so if you select a 3 or a 4, so something that really bothers you, you can put a note in there as to why.
Yes,
Oh, there
there
already
is.
is one. It just scrolled up. Sorry, I didn't see it before.
No problem. It wasn't on the screen. So, but there are comment boxes for those. And Jenna, do you want to talk about the survey completion thing?
Yeah, I am trying to get it set up to do just that, Jessica, because I agree. I mean, I've reviewed this list so many times and it takes hours. So our intent is to make it so that you can go back in and edit until the due date.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. And I also want to go back to this conversation on words. Words do matter. And in some cases, they really matter. And in some cases, they matter a little bit less. So I know there are going to be places where, a word, especially at the beginning of the statement, indicates how strong is this policy. So those comments are important. If there really is language that you feel is not strong enough or is too strong, feel free to put in a 3, but then also say, what would you propose otherwise, so that we can have a discussion about it. Yeah, Brent.
Brent Marsden, I wanted to comment that having looked over quite a few of these pages already, I can see that a lot of the language was cleaned up. There already have been quite a few changes, maybe even half. And then others, for example, the one we just did, P1, it says support, but then it tells how. It says by facilitating, and it gets specific. So I don't have a problem with that. If they elaborate, if they, define it. So it's not quite as daunting as it was before. I see some hope.
Let's end on that message of hope, Brent. Thank you. All right. Well, I think, Jenna, is there anything else you wanted to say about the survey before we go to public comment?
I think just logistically, we know some of you are more comfortable doing survey style input than others. If you would like a staff member, I guess 2 things. One, if you have questions as you're going through, what does this mean? Or why did this change? Things like that. Please feel free to reach out to me with any questions as you go through the process of weighing in on these policies. And then if you'd like to meet with staff, we are happy to be your note taker, right? If you'd rather actually just talk through it, because, an online survey is not your favorite way to provide feedback, please feel free to reach out to me to schedule a time to meet. We're happy to support you in filling out the survey, because I think the main thing is we want you to have time to review the policies and then be able to weigh in so that we can, as Sylvia described, right, know where the group is already at consensus, right? And then know where to focus our time. So.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And I did want to address something in the chat. I think just because it's a little bit logistical for the survey, I think one of the members online gave something a 2, but then also provided edits for that policy. So if that would give it a 3 if you're going to propose edits. A 2 would mean we're like not even really going to discuss it as a CAG. If we come back with some goals and policies that have just ones and twos, we're going to say, hooray, we have a recommendation, we're moving that forward without discussion. So, so you would put in a 3 if you have some edits. That makes sense? Okay. And if you're on the fence and you think you can live with it without that change, maybe consider giving it a 2. Just saying. Yeah, go ahead, Anne.
Ann Foster, so I know we've beaten this topic to death, but I just want to make one final statement here. The interest for me in coming up with descriptive words instead of support or promote or encourage is mainly that they are not actionable. And it's too easy for elected officials, frankly, to say, well, we encouraged it. I went to the farmer's market, so I encourage healthy food distribution or local food. And yet that it's not, we can't hold the decision makers accountable if it's not an actionable word. And I think it's important, if we all care about the climate and what's facing us, that we force the issue by putting them into positions in which they are accountable. I mean, talk to the people in Pacific Palisades, see how they feel about it. So that's what my motivation is more than anything else.
All right. Thank you, Anne. And Monica?
So I just looked up some actionable words that are stronger: objective, enforcement, compliance, accountability, evaluation, transparency, inclusivity, implementation, review, stakeholder engagement, best practices, funding, training, communication, feedback mechanism.
Yeah, so at the next meeting, please do come. If you feel like there's some other words that better describe what you want to see happen with these policies, please come with that. That's great. Be very helpful. Did you want to add something, Amy?
I was just going to add that where you see additional elaboration in some of the policies, just remember or keep in mind that some of that additional information came from all the feedback and the input from the partner agency team staff. And so that's why you might see some differences in the level of specificity.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, so we'll be sending out that survey link tomorrow. And I think now we're ready for a public comment period. So let's pull up the slide for that. If you are online and would like to make a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand. And I have a list of folks in the room, 4 folks in the room that are looking to make comments. So I'll just describe kind of what we're doing here, and thanks for being here to make comment, and then we'll dive in. So I don't see any hands up online, but just go ahead and, okay, there's one online right now. If there's anyone else, please just go ahead and raise your hand now. I think we're going to do about 2 minutes per person for public comment, and we'll just ask, maybe Brent, can they use your microphone? Oh, never mind. There's a microphone back there. So I'll just call your name and you can come up to the podium, and we'll have 2 minutes for your comment. And we just ask you to, say your name. Hopefully your comment is focusing on the substance that was discussed today, and is relevant to the climate element that everyone's talking about. And we'll be, taking notes and making sure that your comments in the record. And we'll have a timer up here, which is very exciting, for public comment. So 2 minutes apiece. And I will start with so I'll call the names and then we'll go in order. Let's go Carmen De Leon, then Jim Byrne, I believe. Then we'll go to Meridian Green online, then Tanya, and then Teresa Hardy. So let's start with Carmen. And and wait just one moment while we get the timer set up.
Yeah, because I can't see my time, so. there's no timer. Oh, no, it's okay. They usually put, there you go. See, it's usually set for 3, so I'm surprised it's at 2. I mean, we should get 3. Everybody gives us 3, but we never, I don't know. Tell me when it's time. Or 3's fine. Now? Okay, my name is Carmen De Leon, and unfortunately, I only have 2 minutes, which isn't even enough to flick through all these pages. That's how bad it is. I was here last time. I'm pretty sure some of you remember me. And unfortunately, when I went home to review what I had said, I'm not online. It says there, no public comment, 0, nothing. There's no record of me online. That's disappointing. Anyhow, since I have such a limited time, wow, only a minute and a half. Wow. So we talked about emergencies. Okay, snow, fire, and water. Like I said, look at that. I'm already more than halfway done. Hemp burns 200 degrees hotter. I mean, it takes that much more heat to burn hemp. And since this is the environment, in order to avoid the whole city burning down, we should mandate using hemp blocks instead of wood, which would, like I said, take 200 times more heat to burn. And also to make bamboo forests, because we make toilet paper. We spend 70,000 acres just a day on toilet paper, and we can grow bamboo in, I think it's 6 months. So we could get a higher turnover if we used our land to make bamboo toilet paper, and that's a business for this state. I would like to become the first sustainable state because we don't need China. We don't need anything. We can grow our own food. We can make our own cheap crap right here. I have to do this real fast. And I am Mayan descent, and I understand the natives, and I think only natives should be able to hunt for salmon or fish for salmon because it's almost extinct. And maybe when we have plenty of salmon, they could do fishing for everybody, but till then it should be stopped until the threat of extinction is over. And if 90 activities took place and you got 30%, 1/3 response, and even if that was 2,000 people, 5,000 out of 400,000, that's nothing. So we do need way more public outreach. And like I said, I have 20 other things, but
Thank you, Carmen.
whatever.
Appreciate that. All right, let's go to, I believe it's Jim Byrne.
Good evening. My name is Jim Byrne, and I'm on the Board of Friends of Clark County. Monica already mentioned that we had made some comments, and I believe Jenna said that those comments have been put in your packets, so you should be able to read them when you want. I want to talk today about 2 main things: trees and water. Mature trees can sequester large amounts of carbon dioxide. Preserving existing mature trees costs the county nothing while greatly reducing the overall CO2 load. An Oregon study authored by more than 65 scientists, experts, and engineers identified that Oregon can make significant headway in curbing greenhouse gas emissions by protecting forests and managing them to increase their carbon capture and storage. We can do the same here. Legacy forests provide tremendous amounts of carbon sequestration, and Clark County should direct the DNR to manage our trust lands for the purpose of conservation and carbon storage. Increasing our urban tree canopy, but realizing planting new trees pales in comparison to protecting old growth or soon to be old growth. Ensure our forest preservation policy is as strong as possible. In town, saplings are not as good as legacy trees in our neighborhoods. And finally, regarding water, please establish in-stream minimum flow criteria and maximum temperature thresholds for all Clark County waters. As an example, the East Fork Lewis can drop to as low as 30 cubic feet per second, and temperatures can reach 70 degrees, which is too hot for salmonids. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Let's go online to Meridian Green.
Hello, my name is Meridian Green, and the first thing I just want to do is appreciate all of you and all of the time you've been putting in on this process. It's an extraordinary body of work that you've produced so far, and it seems to cover an enormous amount of things that really matter to me. I really appreciate what Jim just said and endorse everything he added. One thing that occurred to me when I was looking through this is that this plan might not be looking far enough ahead for certain predictable impacts, which was included in our ACE comments regarding obsolete infrastructure. As we use less and less fossil fuel and change our energy sources, there is a likelihood that there will be infrastructure that just gets abandoned. And in order to make sure that Clark County doesn't end up having to clean up things like gasoline tanks at gas stations that are no longer economically viable, I would like to see some thought given to that. And I don't know if there is a process at this point for adding new topics that might not have been already covered in the plan, but would be a predictable result when the plan is implemented. So I don't quite know where to go with this, but just that when I looked through the amazing work that's been done, I don't see some planning about how we're going to address the changes that will occur when this plan succeeds. So thank you again for all of your work, and thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Meridian. Appreciate that. We'll go back to the folks in the room. And I also, Richard, I note your hand online, so we'll go to you after the two in the room. So let's go to Tanya and then Teresa.
Hi, good evening. Oh, sorry. Okay. My name is Tanya. I started a group in Vancouver here called Vancouver Forest Keepers that focuses on forest stewardship and grassroots volunteerism. I would like to endorse all of the comments made by FOCC regarding language and policies. I also want to underscore the fact that language and the words are very important in, that actionable and accountability piece that was talked about. Specifically, an example would be for G14, where it says advocating to state legislature and the DNR. There needs to be something about facilitating collaboration or delegating to DNR about management objectives, because recently, when we advocated to ask county councilors about speaking to DNR about saving some certain legacy forests, we were given a response that, oh, it's DNR, we don't want to interfere. They know what they're doing. And it's like that totally misses the point of what our resources are doing for our climate goals. So we need to make that into the policy where there is facilitation. Also, I noticed that there isn't any in the goals 11, 12, 15. There's no mention of biodiversity and soil carbon sequestration. Both of those things can hold a lot of weight in policy. So that needs to be specified.
Thank you so much. And then let's go to Teresa.
Teresa Hardy. I'm here from the local Sierra Club. Unfortunately, Mark Lead, our president, had a former scheduled meeting, but we also support the FOCC language and written comments that were sent to you as we supported as an organization. In listening to some of the speakers and in listening to Ann Foster, there is a need for specificity, because when we attend planning commission meetings, when we attend hearing examiners are making decisions, and even the council, when there's words like support, then they can make decisions that really aren't in the best interest of our environment, our trees, our water, and other things. So moving forward, we need climate resiliency to ensure the security of our community. We need to identify existing threats to our forest lands, including plans for mining projects, and address the lack of wildfire protection. On the Clark County website regarding the climate element to the comp plan, it is noted that the legislation crosscuts a lot of topics in the comprehensive plan. Protecting forests from mining and preserving agriculture should be considered in the climate planning process. Climate impacts everything. We must incorporate climate considerations in everything we do as a community. Furthermore, we must adopt ambitious greenhouse gas reduction goals, and we ask you to adopt the City of Vancouver's GHG reduction goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Richard, online.
Okay, my name is Richard Colbert, and I'm going to follow up on one that I emailed in. There are 2 counties in California that have adopted what they call community climate roadmap, and I think it's pretty much covering what you're looking at here. For your staff, they can look up at Santa Clara County Office of Sustainability and Resistance, and I think County of San Mateo also has an office very much like that. And they probably have done a lot of what the county is going to be doing, coming up with a plan. And they might also work with the various cities that have to come up with plans to also create climate action plans or climate action framework like the City of Vancouver has done. And they can probably use what Vancouver's done to help speed up their process. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard. I think that's all the folks that wanted to make public comments. So thanks so much for your comments. And I also want to note that all of the public comments are summarized in the summaries from the CAG, and also the recordings are posted online. So comments should be in there, Carmen. We can double check. And last October's summary might not be online yet. It is? Okay, that should be online too. So let us know if it seems like something's missing. Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that because I have been, they're not putting legislation to make the vanity board state for Washington state. And the legislators going to be that to be a topic that it should be permanently banned for states here in Washington. It's been banned in Finland and other countries. And like I said, who can replace all that? I'm just saying that should be a topic for legislation to permanently ban any deforestation and focus on preservation.
Okay, thank you, Carmen. All right, let's see. And sorry for folks that weren't able to hear that online. Oh, I thought there was a chat comment. All right, so we're gonna move into next steps. Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
So everything that we heard from the public, we bring that into the yes portion and try to put it into the policy? Or how do we incorporate that?
Yeah, this is Jenna. So, right, so anyone can give public comment to you, right, in writing or come to your meetings. And as a advisory group member, it's, you know, it's your job to listen, review it, and you consider it. And you can decide if you wish to do anything with it or not. So yes, if there's things you're hearing that you like, incorporate it into how you respond to the survey.
Perfect. So reach out to me, everyone who wants me to incorporate it.
Thanks, Monica. All right, so let's go into wrap up and next steps. I think I'm turning it over to Jenna for this.
All right, just real quick, we saw this at the beginning of the meeting, the end of the timeline. Next meeting, we will continue working on considering the additional feedback from all these various entities as you all discuss and refine the policy list further. Next meeting, we will also talk about a possible subcommittee to help draft a letter to the Planning Commission and Council from you all. So we'll introduce that at the February meeting as well. I think that's all I'll touch on this slide for now.
All right. And one thing I also want to confirm is the subcommittee. So this is a subcommittee that's going to talk about the Washington legislation on natural gas and linking that to the work of this group for the building and energy policies and goals. So I had my list, well, I don't know where it is, but it was Noel, Monica, Dawn, and a nomination for Nelson with.
Nick Massey, I did text Nelson and he confirmed that he'd like to be part of that.
Perfect. Okay. So those four seem like a good representative group. Is that good for the subcommittee? Okay, then we'll reach out to you all, or I'm sure Jenna will reach out to schedule something in the coming weeks. So appreciate that. All right. Well, I think that is all for today. So thank you all for your attention and hard work, and get ready for some more hard work. We've got a couple months to finish this out. So thank you. Bye.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.